welcome back. I'm joined live in the studio now by John Fullerton, one of the two candidates for Eureka City Council Ward 3. Mr. Fullerton, thank you so much for joining us on Redwood News.
Glad to be here.
Well, thank you. Now, what relevant experience will you bring to the council if you are elected?
Well, I moved to Eureka 40 years ago, and I have volunteered on many community organizations. I was on the Eureka School Board for 12 years and Eureka Planning Commission for 4 years. And I'm a CPA. I started my practice in Old Town more than 30 years ago.
Now, what would be your top priorities for your constituents if you are elected to the council?
Well, first of all, we need to make sure that City Council listens to the viewpoints of all segments of our society and treat them with respect. And we need to make sure the council remembers that they have an impact on our local economy and our local businesses, and that we depend on those businesses to provide jobs and badly needed sales tax revenue for the city coffers.
Now, one of the things you mentioned there is that it's kind of a dual role in many respects. Obviously, you've got to meet the needs of those living in your ward, but then you've got to collaborate with other councillors as well who have different needs for their ward, etc. So how will you go about actually building that consensus?
So you got to remember that when you're on the city council, that you don't get anywhere unless you get 3 votes. So you have to maintain cordial relations with all the other council members, and remember that someone who opposes you on one issue may be an ally on the next issue.
Now, what would you say would be the top 3 qualities any person elected to this ward needs to bring to the office?
Well, you have to be hardworking, because there's a lot that goes into being a city council member. For every 3-hour board meeting, council meeting, there's another dozen hours at least of going through pages and pages and pages of documents and various committee meetings. And you need to remember that you work for the people, and that ultimately they're the boss.
Now, that brings us on to something else, because the pay structure for the councillors does make it almost certainly a part-time role. So I'm wondering how you'll balance your day job, to call it to that, with your council responsibilities.
Well, you just have to make time. And being self-employed, I'm flexible. And what it will mean is that I will have some of my employees working overtime to make up for the time that I'm not there.
Now, it's a very important role in our community, but there have been issues with individuals in the past who've held similar offices. How would you avoid falling into any similar negative situation?
Well, by making sure that you treat people with respect, and even those people whose opinions are different than yours, and not to take it personal when people insult you. And just make sure you remember it's not personal, it's just business.
Now, is there anything you'd like to share about your personal background and interests that you think voters should know to help them make up their minds in this election?
Well, I moved to Eureka more than 40 years ago, and married my wife, Gail, who's a native of Arcata. I've raised all my children here in Eureka. They were all born at Eureka General Hospital, and they all attended Eureka Public Schools. So I've got a big investment in Eureka.
Now, where can people find out more information about you and your campaign?
Well, I do have a business website, but actually the best place to get to know more about me is on my Facebook page. I have a campaign Facebook page, which I don't use very often, so it's my personal Facebook page, which would be the best place for people to check out.
Okay. Well, Mr. Fullerton, thank you so much indeed for coming into Redwood News to join us today. Really appreciate it very much.
Well, glad to be here.
Well, thank you. I certainly wish you the very best in the campaign.
Thank you.
Okay. And we'll be right back after this short break.